This is America's first greatest generation. People from all walks of life who experienced the Revolutionary War and then lived into the age of photography in the 1840s and 1850s. In the early 1800s, the United States government created a new set of legislation, Pension Acts, meant to guarantee a monthly payment to aging veterans of the Revolutionary War. But many of these old soldiers had no evidence of their service, so instead they went to their local courthouses and magistrates and recorded detailed oral memoirs of their Revolutionary War service. Over 80,000 applied for pensions, and this amazing trove, the nation's first Veterans Oral History Project, sat largely unutilized in federal archives for over a century. The museum's Pension Project pairs those pension memoirs with today's generation of veterans, asking veterans to reflect on similarities and differences between their service and that of people over 2 centuries ago.
The Tories followed him and run him into the American lines, and they were taken prisoners by the Americans, and the next day was hung for being traitors to the American cause. He cannot recollect the names of many of the places that he was at during his terms of service, as he was kept very close to his team and knew but little else, only what related to them.
My name's Matthew Midget, and I'm talking about William Burnett, who was a wagoner and briefly an infantryman in the American Revolutionary War. I guess you could say that what he did, how he contributed, was as similar as you could get to what I did for someone who fought in that war. He was a wagoner, transporting goods and war rations and things like that around. He traveled with the cargo by nature of how things got around at that point in time. My job field has like 3 main areas, ramp, cargo, and passenger services. I spent the beginning of my time in ramp, which is basically just loading planes with cargo, anything that the military was moving. But then after that, I switched over to special handling, which was a subsection of the cargo section, which looks a little bit different when you're deployed. When you're stateside, it's mostly chemicals and things like that, medicine that needs to be moved around. When you're deployed, I know a lot of people refer to it as blood, bombs, and bodies because that's like the main thing you deal with.
He hardly ever knew when he started where he was going till he arrived at the place of loading, and when he received his loading. He knew not where he had to take it, as the wagon master did not allow the wagoners to question him, and seldom happened that the wagon guards knew more than the wagoners.
One of my favorite parts about William's pension account is when he talked about being told only enough that he needed to do his job. And that really resonated with me because that was one of my main frustrations. You really are told only as much as you need to know to do your job, which is just really frustrating because, when you're out doing a tedious job in the desert for a few months, or even when you're back home, going there once a weekend every month, it's super easy to just feel like all of it's pointless and to not really understand what you're doing, and just to get super jaded about it all.
He does not now recollect whether he ever was out of the state of Virginia and North Carolina or not. He thinks his services was confined to them 2 states, or nearly so. He recollects of hauling a load of provision to the mouth of Queen's Creek, where there was a number of soldiers stationed. Recollects passing by with the wagon a mountain called King's Mountain, as they told him. Thinks it was after the battle had been fought there. Also recollects of seeing General Washington twice on the road with his lifeguard with him, and will never forget, while he retains his memory, the polite bow that the general made to the poor wagoners as he passed them.
All right, so at one point, William talks about meeting George Washington, and I guess the parallel to today for my job would be if I worked in passenger services, which I'm thankful I never had to, because that's the section that you're gonna work in and deal with people like our modern day equivalent of George Washington. Generals will go through there, secretaries will go through the airport, senators will go through there. And as much as I did not like working in special handling, I would rather have been in that section than in passenger services because from what I can tell, most of the bigwigs that come through there are not fun people to deal with. And much more stressful, I think, than writing things on a clipboard while you're in a field of bombs.
Also recollects having, at one time when he came to camps with a load of provision, heard of a circumstance that shocked him mightily. That was, as they informed him, his old captain, which was Walker, and several other officers was walking together down the ditch that surrounded their encampment, and Captain Walker happened to raise his head above the ditch, and the Tories fired on him and killed him. And remembers that one day, while resting, he heard a noise like the clashing of arms in an old field, and he left his wagon and run to see, and saw the British and Americans fight. They were all horsemen, and that he was so scared that he caught hold of a pine and trembled so that he shook the bush mightily. He instantly remembered his wagon and the wagon master, and run to the wagon, for fear the wagon master would come and whip him.
So I remember once I went out there to do an inspection without realizing that a practice demolition or explosion was happening. It went off and I was like, oh man, this is it. Like we're under attack. And I think William talks about being so scared at one point that he like clung to a shrub or something. And I thought, it's funny to read, but I mean, my reaction to when I thought I was being attacked was to just get in the truck I drove out in and put the radio on. Because I didn't really know what else to do, and I felt like it was kind of a lost cause to try to escape a field of bombs with an explosion so close. So I don't know, I definitely related to reacting to what you think is combat or what is combat in a funny way.
If he started before the 24th of July into the service, he was not quite 15 years old, as that is his birthday, and when he found the service of the United States not to be going to be a frolic, he often wished his term of service out and took but little notice of anything else but the time, as it seemed slowly to pass.
My parents were against financially supporting me, even like co-signing loans for me to go off to college, unless I enlisted to some degree. They thought that it added some sort of financial security. So I was encouraged by them to enlist in the reserves if I wanted to go to school. I was 17 at the time. You can still enlist before you turn 18. I enlisted 3 months after I graduated high school and went off to basic. And I regretted it pretty immediately. It's so easy to hyperfixate on how long you've been out there and just time in general. Like a half hour could feel like 3 days depending on how much attention you're paying to the clock. It was a common thing out there to the people who had been out there for a few months. When new people arrived, they would kind of tell the new people, like, you got to live meal to meal. Like, you wake up, you get yourself breakfast. The only thing you look forward to after that is lunch. And then after that, just look forward to dinner and then repeat the whole thing. Because if you start to think, big picture, if you start looking at the calendar too much, it just drags on. Yeah.
And while guarding the prisoners, an officer rode up on a panting horse with a cocked hat on and ordered the guards to form a square with the prisoners in the inside. And then the news of the surrender of Lord Cornwallis was read, and remembers that the officer threw his cocked hat up in the air, and almost every American present done the same, and the words, "America is ours," seemed to almost rend the air, and was the joy at that time. The prisoners were ordered to Prince Edward Courthouse, and there he was discharged, but received no written discharge after remaining about 1 week in the service.
That's it. Yeah, so the part in William's pension where he discusses, the end of the war and the excitement with the end of the war, I definitely related to. I really related to that. Coming home after my deployment was amazing. It's so easy to appreciate so little once you finish something like that. I know the first place I went to after we got home, and I went right to the convenience store, bought a black coffee, and I bought a protein cookie. And I don't think I've ever drank a cup of coffee faster or eaten a protein cookie quicker. So it's just really exciting to do something as simple as that. I would have loved to known what William particularly was excited to do or see or even just eat following the end of the war, because I'm sure things were even harder for him in that war.